Hello, my loves, and welcome to this week's episode of I Think I Need Therapy. This is going to be a little bit of a... I don't know if it's going to be a heavier episode. In my mind, it is just because it's something that's sensitive to me right now. But we'll see where it goes. As with any of my episodes, take it however you take it, however it applies to you. Whatever fits for you fits. Take what resonates and leave the rest. I am a little bit cautious of even sharing this advice right now because it's something that I'm going through. Well, not going through, but something that I'm going through and I'm dealing with the effects of right now. So I'm cautious to even share anything about it because I don't want to be sharing the wrong things or sharing it from the wrong mindset or the wrong perspective. But I think what I'm going to be saying is stuff that I need to hear myself, and I hope something that can help someone else out. And just by sharing how I am feeling right now and what I did feel and what I went through and what other people could be going through, just by sharing that, I think could also help people. And that is my intention and my hope with this episode here. And I'm going to be talking about abusive relationships, emotional, physical, abusive relationships. And when I say relationships, I don't just mean boyfriend and girlfriend, married, whatever, partners. I do mean any type of interpersonal relationship. It's not the right word. I think it is. Because I haven't had a boyfriend yet. I have been in an abusive relationship, because these can happen in any sort of relationships or situations or whatever you want to call it. It can happen in any sort of relationship with someone. It can happen between you and your parents, or you and a friend, you and someone you just started seeing, or someone you've been married to for years. It can happen in any sort of relationship, and they fucking suck. And they're very hard to go through. And it's also very hard to see that you're in an abusive relationship. So it's something I want to talk about because in my last therapy session, this is why I say it's just so recent for me, and which is why I'm a little bit hesitant talking about it, but I think it's something that's on my mind and I just feel like needs to be said, or talked about. But in my last therapy session, my therapist, we were going over why I have certain beliefs about myself and why I have all this shame and all this guilt, and all this self-blame keeps coming up. And she was like, well, you've never actually really explained to me why you're feeling all this self-blame. Because we talk about a certain scenario a lot, and I didn't really talk about what specifically causes self-blame. Sorry, I'm going to be very vague because there's a lot of stuff I don't think I'm ready to actually share to the world yet. I do want to at some point, but there's a lot of stuff and a lot of things that happened that I don't want to share yet. So I will be very vague, but I hope it just helps you to fill in the gaps with your own situations and stuff. But anyways, she's like, you haven't really explained to me what actually, what was going on that made you have all this blame, or why you feel this blame, or what you're really blaming yourself for. And I told her what the relationship with this one individual was like. And I've explained it to many people before as this, and I never really clued in to the fact of what it was. But I basically told her, it was like this cycle where I would, we were in some sort of seeing each other for over a year, and it was very on and off in a cycle of being together and then seeing each other and then me being no, you're actually awful, stop talking to each other, and then few months later, a few weeks later, we go back to each other, and then it happens over and over again. And I explained it with a little bit more detail, and she told me that she was like, that's an abusive cycle. That is an abusive relationship. It doesn't matter that you weren't in an actual like relationship, that we weren't dating, that we didn't have those labels, but that was an abusive relationship. And hearing that was like, as much as it's like you would hear it and you'd be like, holy fuck, like that's awful that I went through that, felt so good hearing that. I felt so good hearing I was in an abusive relationship. But I that sounds funny, but I really did, because it was the most validating thing ever. And it just made things in my brain click. It was like, yeah, that makes sense, that it was abusive, and that was not okay, and that, you know, he did a lot of things where it was like he kept me in that cycle. And emotionally, it was emotionally abusive. Well, there was things I don't want to get into, but it was mainly an emotionally abusive relationship. And I think a lot of the times when we think about abusive relationships, you go to like, oh, like he was beating you, or he was yelling at you and like throwing these fits and throwing chairs everywhere, and he kept like hitting you, but you kept going back, or you have all these bruises on you as evidence. And it's like, no, actually, he didn't hit me. He didn't throw chairs. He didn't scream or yell at me or whatever. He didn't do that, but he did all this other stuff. So I'm using he because that's my scenario. You can be anyone, and it could have happened to you, and any gender or person could have been your abuser, but I'm gonna say he because that's what relates to me and what I will use, because it's just what will come out, because that's how I think of it. I had to put that out there. But your abuser doesn't have to be physically abusive to be abusing you. Emotional abuse looks like it's very controlling and very manipulative at times as well. It can look like them accusing you of cheating, and just like a lot of signs of jealousy and possession. It's a lot of possession too with emotional abuse. And like it could look like them constantly being like, where are you? Like, why are you not sharing your location? Like, where the fuck are you right now? Like, I'm coming to you. That stuff. I mean, there's extremes. Like, yes, it's nice to know where your partner is, but when someone crosses the line of like getting mad, when they get mad and they get possessive and they accuse you for things that are just so wrong, like that is toxic. That's toxic, and that's abusive. And a lot of times it's narcissists that do this as well. I'm not saying that my abuser was a narcissist. I don't know if he was or not, but like narcissists will just make it all about them, and then, well, he fucking was a narcissist. He didn't give a shit about me. But it's all about them, and like you are just there filling a role for them, and you need to be theirs, and you need to be doing things for them. So it can look a lot like that, or it can just be like constant checking, or like attempting to control your behavior. Like checking on your behavior, or like constantly trying to like control you. That is not good. Or constantly arguing or opposing to you, getting defensive a lot, criticizing, gaslighting, trying to isolate you from your family and friends, or like literally isolating you from your family and friends. That is all a part of emotional abuse. Just all toxic and not part of a healthy relationship. My abuser, so weird calling him that, even though that's what he is, and he deserves that fucking title. My abuser gaslit me, and like he got defensive a lot with a lot of things. And I think with emotional abuse and with abusive relationships in general, it's especially when we think of them as those like huge, like like they need to be hitting you and you need to have like the physical evidence and they need to be like throwing chairs, and that's what abusive relationships are. Because we look at them like that and put that picture on them, it's like, it's hard when you're going through something that's like not that extreme. It's more like this emotional abuse or like slightly physical abuse as well. But when you're going through something that's emotionally abusive, especially when emotional abusive relationships are kind of normalized at this point, like that controlling behavior, that constant checking in, and that constant like that possessiveness and all that is kind of starting to get very normalized. And I think that's also why I kind of got trapped in these relationships, is because I like saw on TikTok or online like people going through this, or like, you know, it's normalized to constantly be checking in on where your partner is, or it's normalized to like have their location and be like suspicious about what they're doing and have trust issues. Like I feel like that's so normalized. It made me really confused, and I know it can make people also confused. And then it gets to the point where you see it as like, I need to prove that this was bad enough. Like I need to prove to everyone else that like, you know, I went through this and it was bad. Like, yeah, it was an abusive relationship. Now that I'm out of it, I'm like, I need to prove that. I need to prove that it was bad, or bad enough for me to be feeling the way I'm feeling. I think a lot of people go through this point where they're like, it wasn't that bad. Like, it's not that bad. You know, like he could be doing so much worse to me. When it is this like emotional abuse especially, it's like, well, he could be physically abusing me. He could be throwing those chairs. He could be yelling. Or even if it is to that point, like you always think it could be worse. There is something more where it could be worse, you know? And you just think like, well, it's not that bad. And you kind of just get used to their behavior and you start putting up with it, and it becomes normalized within your life. And it's just what's normal to you. But once you're out of it, you also get to the point where you're like, well, was it really that bad? Like, is it okay for me to be feeling guilty? Is it like valid enough for me to be feeling ashamed and embarrassed? And you're like questioning yourself and the whole thing. And you're like, well, I did feel kind of comfortable with them. Like, why did I leave? You're questioning a bunch. And you question yourself a lot. And you try and prove that it was really bad and validate. Like, validation is huge. And that's why when my therapist told me, yeah, that was an abusive relationship, I felt good. Because it was so validating to just hear that, like, yeah, that was bad. And I did go through that, and like, okay, it is valid for me to be reacting the way I'm reacting. It's valid for me to be feeling the way I'm feeling. That is valid. And hearing her say that was just so nice to be validated. And I think when you go through this spiral of like, it's not that bad, like it could have been worse, blah, 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 all this self-blame and everything, you just don't feel validated, and you feel like you need to prove to yourself that it was that bad. And I think that is a very common experience when going through these type of things. And in my personal experience, what I am going through and what I'm feeling now from that whole cycle that I went through, because he would basically, he would basically treat me with no respect, treat me like nobody would even treat a human, to be honest. Like, it was so silly. It was just so silly. It was like, how do you, like, I would get into the car and he wouldn't even say hi, he wouldn't even speak to me, and we'd just go to his place and he wouldn't even really speak to me. He would a few words, but not really. And he like just would kind of ignore me while I was there, or he'd play video games and ignore me while I was there, and he wouldn't even like communicate anything with me at all. when I would see him out in public, he wouldn't really acknowledge me whatsoever, kind of ignore me. There was times where he just like literally left me alone in his apartment. Like I would get there and he would just leave. And I'd be there waiting, lonely. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? He'd just leave. I'm like, what the fuck? I just got here and now you're leaving without even saying anything to me? Or we'd like, I'd think I was going to hang out with him, but he'd just like drive somewhere to pick up something and then go drop it off at a friend's, and then we'd go to his and wouldn't even say anything to me or say like, oh, I'm just going to pick this up. Like there was just no communication. And he like also just did not care about me at all. He didn't care. And he wouldn't even tell me when he was coming to pick me up. He would just come and fucking get me, and I'm just like, what? Or we'd plan on hanging out at this time and he'd be like, oh, he'd come like 5 hours later, and I would let him, and I would still go, and I would still keep seeing him. And those are just a few examples I could think of because I don't want to share the big things. But there's a lot of stupid stuff. And he would do it, and then finally I get to the point where I'm like, you know what, you're literally fucked. Like, why are you treating me this way? And then I'd end it. I'd ghost him or stop talking to him, or I'd just be like, no, I'm like done with this. And then we wouldn't talk for a few weeks or a month or whatever, or a few months even. And then one of us would go back and we start texting each other again, and we'd start things back up. But we would start it up by saying like, oh, like, well then why did we stop talking last time? Like, he'd stop me and be like, he'd be like, I miss you. And I'd be like, well, why did you stop talking to me? And then he'd be like, well, you didn't answer my snap this one time, so I thought you were like mad at me. I was like, what? So that you stopped talking to me? Or he would just stop talking to me and I'd be like, what the fuck? And now you're saying you miss me? And then I'd tell him, or I'd go back and I'd text him and he'd be like, well, why'd you stop talking to me? And then each time I'd tell him like, well, you literally don't talk to me. You don't do anything. You don't treat me with any respect or human decency at all. Like, can you at least do these things? And then he'd be like, he'd apologize. He'd be really sympathetic. And then he'd make the changes and be like, yeah, okay, I can do that. Can we just try this again? Like, let's just give me another chance. So I'd be like, okay, fine. And I'd give him another chance. And he'd make those changes. And then slowly he would go back to being how he was and not being great and, like not really giving a shit about me. But then like trying to hold me by a string and being like, well, no, I only want you, like, I want to be the only guy you're with. I want to be the only guy you're seeing and whatever. Like, we can make a relationship work, whatever. Like, I want you to be all mine. Those kind of comments, possessive comments. And then I would get my hopes up, and we did have some good times, and like, he did make the changes. So then I was looking at those, and I kept making excuses for him, and my roommate would tell me, she'd be like, Annika, you're fucking making excuses for this guy. Like, stop it. He's awful. And I'd be like, I know, but like, I don't know. And I just kept seeing the good in him and like trying to like see the best in it and being like, well, you know what, like, he could be a really good boyfriend, but if he just needs to let go of these things, or he just needs to do this, and like, he's just got stuff to work through, and he just like was raised differently and all this stuff. And I kept making these fucking excuses for this guy. And then it get to the point where like he would stop showing those changes, and I'd be like, okay, you know what? No, I'm done. I need to walk away. And then it was that was the cycle. And that is an abusive cycle, because he would make the change. I would tell him like, no, you're not doing this. He would make the changes and then slowly not make them, and then I'd be done, and then he'd be like, no, like, I'll change again, give me another chance. And then he'd do it, and then he like would stop, and then it would end, and then I'd be like, well, you're fucked. And then he'd be like, but I need you need to be all mine, like, blah blah blah, and over and over and over. And then I would block him and he'd be like, what the fuck, why'd you block me, like just add me back, blah 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 blah. Okay, anyways. Yeah, and I kept going back. I did, every time, for over a year. It happened multiple times. We were in a nice routine cycle, and there were good times. There were 2 or 3 good 4 things to it, but the majority of it was not good. It was not good. I felt like shit all the time in the relationship and the whole thing. Like, it did not make me feel good, except for the little moments where he would like compliment me, or I'd snap him and he'd like save my selfie in the chat, or he'd ask me like how my day was or what I was doing, and he'd want to hang out with me, and that was just so exciting. And it was awful because, well, no, what made it really hard is that his behaviors were so far below bare minimum, so far, that I got used to that behavior. So when he gave me like an ounce of anything, and any ounce of little bit of effort, I would get so excited, and it'd be like, oh my god, he's trying, he wants me. And that little bit ounce of effort got me so excited and made me, like, even though it was very much below bare minimum. He took me out for food in the McDonald's drive-thru, and I got so excited over that. What the fuck? The man needs to take me out to dinner, not through a McDonald's drive-thru. What? Anyways, the bare minimum, his little bits of effort made me feel like he was doing something, when really he literally was not. And in these relationships, these toxic, abusive ones, that's normally what happens, is where you hold on to the good things, you hold on to the little bit of good things, and those few good moments you had, and like the changes he did make, and how he showed that, like, okay, he can change, he can, like, it can get better. He has that potential. And you hold on to, like, well, this one time he did that, and like, that one time we had a really good time, and he made me feel like really wanted and whatever. Like, he does really care for me. He just like is bad at showing it sometimes, or doesn't really show it, but he does care for me. He does really like me. Like, he keeps coming back, blah 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 blah. You latch on to that and hold on to that, and that's what, like, why you keep going back. And I've also realized, like, it isn't my fault that I kept going back, and I keep blaming myself, and I keep saying it's my fault. Like, yes, I take accountability for my actions. I do take accountability. Like, I did keep going back. Sure, I take accountability, but it's not my fault that I got stuck in that cycle. He is the one who kept showing me a little bit of faith, kept showing me a little bit of effort, and I'm just a girl. I held on to that. But all I wanted, and I think this is what happens in a lot of relationships, and we're human, all I wanted was to feel wanted, and to feel cared for, and to feel loved in some way. And in some way he fulfilled that. Even if it was half-assed fulfillment, he was still fulfilling it in some way. And that's what kept me going back. And I can't blame myself, I can't shame myself for wanting that, for wanting to feel wanted, for wanting to feel cared for and loved. I can't blame myself for that, because I am human. And I think that's where we all get stuck, in that self-blame cycle, because we forget the fact that that person was fulfilling that. They did make you feel wanted in some way. They gave you attention, and you being human, that's all you want. And depending on your past and how you were raised and all that stuff. Like, I can leave you with parts of you that just long for that attention, long for that, and just desire to feel so wanted and so loved and so cared for. And so you can't blame yourself for just wanting that. And I think that is the main reason why we get stuck in the abusive cycle, and why we keep going back to these people who aren't good for us, why we keep going back in these toxic relationships, is because we're human and we just want to feel loved and wanted and cared for, and that is okay. But so forgive yourself for that. Forgive yourself for that. It is not your fault for getting stuck in that cycle. You're human and it happens. And you can't blame the past version of yourself for going back, because I do this so much where I'm like, well, why the fuck did I go back? How did I not know? How did I not see how bad he was? Like, I knew, and that's why I kept ending it. Like, I knew better. Like, how stupid am I for still seeing him? Why the fuck would I keep going back to him? Why would I keep talking to him? Like, I knew better than this. How could I let myself go through this? How could I let this all happen? Blah, 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 blah. Like I said, all that self-blame and shame and guilt. But now I realize I can't fully blame myself for that. I didn't know in that moment that it would end up the way it does. It's so easy for me sitting here where I am to look back and say, yeah, I should have known this would have happened. Yeah, like, I should have known it would have ended up this way. Like, how did I saw all the signs? How did I not see all this stuff? Because now me sitting here knows the end, knows how it ended, knows that, and can see all of the bad things throughout the relationship. I can see it clearly now, whereas past me did not see it clearly. I was in that relationship. I felt wanted in some way. He was fulfilling my desires in some way, fulfilling something in some way. And I didn't know it would end up in me being so hurt and in an abusive cycle. I didn't know that. I can't blame my past self for not knowing that. I can't blame her for continuing on, because she didn't know. She didn't know it would end up the way it did. It's not her fault for not seeing the future, not predicting the future, because how could I have? I couldn't. I just was seeing the best in it and hoping for the best, because that's what I wanted. I wanted it to turn out well. I wanted him to be that person he was when he made those changes. And he showed me that he could make those changes, but he stopped and he kept stopping. But I saw that he could be that person. I held on to that. And I'm only human. That happens. So there's no point of blaming myself and getting so self-critical, because it only makes me feel worse, and it only makes things worse to go through that spell. I think, yes, learn from it in any way you can, but be thankful now that you've grown, you went through it, and now you can see the signs of a toxic relationship. You know that, like, you don't want to stay in that anymore. Know that, like, you've grown so much as a person from that, but don't hold yourself back from love now. And to anyone who is afraid of relationships, afraid of loving people, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of vulnerability, to anyone who is afraid of that, know that it is okay to feel. It is okay to feel and experience your feelings. I think it is so much better to let yourself love, to let yourself experience the excitement, experience the butterflies, let yourself experience the happiness, let yourself experience it all of those good things. It's so much better to do that than to hold yourself back from that in fear of the hurt, in fear of the pain that may or may not come because you're just predicting the future at that point. You're just trying to predict the future and be like, well, I'm just gonna get hurt and it's all just gonna go to shit. You don't know that. Like I said, you don't know the future. All you know is the now. And now, if you are feeling excited and if there's a relationship that you want, a relationship that you're gonna get into, don't hold yourself back in fear that something bad will happen, in fear that you will get hurt again, in fear that you'll go through these abusive relationships again. Because how are you ever going to experience that happiness, experience love in your life, if you keep holding yourself back from it and you keep trying to predict the future like, oh, they're just gonna hurt me, it's all gonna end up the same? It's so much better just to let yourself go. Let yourself love. And from all of these flings, I guess you could call it, that I've been through, I keep coming to this point where I'm like, how the fuck did I let that all happen? How did I let myself go? How did I let myself be vulnerable? How did I let myself feel all that excitement? Why did I go through that excitement? Go through that happiness? Why did I even like the guy? Why did I do that? Just for it to end up like him hurting me, for it to end up bad, for it to not work out. Why did I let myself do that? And I blame myself all the time, and I'm like, why? But the thing is, I would much rather myself give all those relationships a chance. Like, yeah, sure, they didn't turn out great, they didn't end up great, but that shows so much about me, and the fact that, like, you know what, I let myself feel that excitement. I experienced the excitement, and that was fun. It was fun and it was exciting, and yeah, it turned out bad, but I didn't know that, and I gave it a chance, and I still experienced the happy feelings. But either way, you will feel the pain and the hurt and the regret. Either way, if it ends or if you end it in advance, you're still going to go through some sort of pain. Whether it's you stopping it before it happens, maybe you think that's the best. That's you putting up so many walls to protect yourself. And when you do that, you will probably end up regretting it, going through the spiral of, well, fuck, what if I did that? Like, I keep stopping myself. I keep getting in the way of myself from experiencing all this happiness. Like, why the fuck do I keep doing this? And you'll still go down through the self-blame spiral and, like, just get mad at yourself for not letting yourself feel. Probably. I'm not saying everyone will feel this way, but it's commonly what happens. And so you'll still feel some sort of pain there, and yes, if it ends, it hurts. It does. It hurts. But you just have to let yourself feel that pain and feel it through. And just keep reminding yourself, like, you know what? At least I tried. At least I tried. And I learned something from it. And you know, like, now that's not your person. But how are you ever going to know, and how are you going to ever find your person? How are you ever going to experience that love? How are you ever going to experience that joy and that real feeling of being cared for and wanted? Because that's something we all desire so much. Like, how are you ever going to fulfill that and really feel that if you don't give yourself the chance to? Because let me tell you, you all deserve to feel cared for and wanted and loved. You all deserve that in a healthy way, in a sustainable way. You all deserve that. Every single one of you listening to this right now, even if you're not listening to this right now, you still deserve it. You do. No matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, no matter what has happened in your life, you still deserve to feel loved and wanted and cared for. You do. And sometimes, yes, those feelings can put us into situations where it doesn't end very well. And sometimes those feelings are really scary because they make us more vulnerable. And I know it's scary. I know it's scary to be vulnerable. But being vulnerable is a very, very powerful thing, and something that will let you experience those good emotions that you so desire to feel. So let yourself feel them. Let yourself go and feel them, and give yourself the chance to feel them and to experience that greatness. Give yourself the chance, because you deserve it. Yes. You never actually know how things will end up. We can't predict the future. You never know. You never know. So don't sabotage it. Don't predict it before it even happens, because you don't know. It could turn out really good, or it can turn out bad. But you'll never know until you give it a chance. Okay? Okay. And I know for all of you who have been through abusive relationships, have been through toxic, horrible relationships, it's so hard. It's so hard to get into a new one and be like, yeah, this is gonna, and like look at it in a positive light. It's so hard to look at it in this positive light and not put up those walls and not protect yourself. But I think the key with that is just to notice. Notice that those walls are coming up. Notice that you're trying to protect yourself. Notice that you're holding back, and that, you know, you're trying to run away. Notice that, and just inspect it a little bit. Be like, okay, why am I trying to protect myself? I am protecting myself right now from getting hurt. But what am I doing? I'm predicting the future. What am I leaving out? What are the facts that I'm really leaving out here? Look at the situation as a whole and be like, okay, I actually can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. I just want to feel loved, but I'm scared of getting hurt. But I'll never feel loved if I don't give myself the chance to. Go through it all, put the map out, and look at it from a wider view. Are you overanalyzing? Are you oversimplifying? Are you putting, what is it called? I forget. But putting one situation or one experience that you had and applying it to everything else in your life. Is that what you're doing? Inspect it, take that wider view, and go back and be like, okay, actually, it's okay for me to it's okay for me to let these walls down. It's okay for me to give this a chance. And I know it's all scary, but you have to feel the fear and do it anyways. Feel the fear and do it anyways, and take the chance anyways. That is my message to you all. And my message to anyone who is going through those feelings of self-blame and just like, you know, you start to lose trust in yourself and confidence in yourself and get more insecure. And anyone who's feeling like low self-esteem because of relationships they've been through and abusive relationships that they've been through, know that it's not your fault. And I see you, I hear you, and I'm always here for you. You do deserve to feel loved. You do deserve it all. And you can get to a point where you do trust yourself again, because it's not your fault. You're not the one who you're not the one who did all that. You're human. The abuser is the one who manipulated you and abused you and kept you in that cycle. And one thing my therapist said to me was that sometimes you have to go through the cycle. She said, I had to go through that abusive cycle to get out of it. And she related it to the example of like someone who's addicted to smoking, and how when a smoker quits or decides they need to stop smoking, normally it's not like one day you're like, okay, I'm going to quit, and then they go cold turkey and never touch a cigarette again, or whatever they're smoking again. That's very rarely happens. Normally they quit, and then they go back to it, and then they quit again, and they go through the cycle of quitting, and then going back, and then quitting, and then going again, and quitting, and not until it gets to the point where you're like, okay, I'm done for good. You have to go through the multiple you have to build up the strength from the multiple times that you did quit to finally walk away and be like, I am actually done now. And it's hard to build up that strength. It's hard to build up the courage to finally walk away for good. It is. And sometimes you just have to stay through it until you get to the point where you're like, okay, no. Something big happens, you're like, fuck, okay, I'm gone. That's what happened to me, is where something big happened, and I feel embarrassed and so ashamed of myself a lot of the times, because I'm like, even after that big thing happened in the relationship, I still went back. Even though I knew how fucked that was of him to do, I still went back to the point until I finally was like, okay, no, I can't do that anymore. I can't. There's no more of this. That was awful. I do not deserve that. Done. For good. And sometimes that's what it takes happening, something where it's like the final straw. Or sometimes you just need to take a wider view, take a step back and be like, you know what? No, I deserve so much better. I am strong enough. I can get out of this. And quit. Step away, walk away, and be done with it. But know that it's not your fault. You are human and you do deserve proper, healthy, loving love and care and want. You deserve all the good things. You don't deserve that treatment. You don't. No matter who you are, no matter how much they may make you feel like you deserve it and it's all your fault and all on you. No. There is better out there for you that you do deserve. I hope this is helpful for someone and something that someone can... I hope there is something that people could take away and that I said the right things. But know that I love you all so much and I'm always here for every single one of you. I thank you all for being here. Thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. If any of you ever want me to talk about a certain subject or topic or anything, please let me know. DM me, put it in my little request Google document. And I will give you any advice that you need, personally, privately, or on the podcast. If there's any stories of mine that you would like to hear, let me know. Yeah. Let me know. I thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you all had a fantastic week, and I hope you have another great week, because I will talk to you again next Tuesday. And that's all for now. Love you all so much. Know that you're loved. Know that you're worthy. Know that you are enough. You are. I love you. Okay. Bye. Ba ba la ba. Ba ba la ba 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 ba. Ba ba la ba. Yeah. Bye 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 bye.